अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to another episode of Hafta, and I say this every week for the last several weeks, and I will continue to say it. Welcome from very polluted, disgusting aired NCR, Delhi and surrounding areas. While so far nothing dramatic is being planned or done by those who are in positions of power, the youngsters of Delhi continue to suffer with their lungs being poisoned forever. Old people like us don't give a shit because we led a very healthy, happy childhood. But congratulations, those of you sitting on your ass doing nothing and worshipping our politicians who are also doing nothing. Your children will be very proud of you when they're adults with weak lungs. So, well done, you all. On that positive note, let me introduce the panel. In the studio, Shardool, Katyayan. Hi,
Hello.
Shardool. Joining us online from Gurgaon, which is as polluted as Delhi, is Rahul Pandita.
Hi, a little better than Delhi, Abhi, I would assume.
Okay, a little better than Delhi, yes, you're probably right. A lot better than Delhi from the coastal city of Chennai is Jayashree Arunachalam. Hi, Jayashree.
Yes. Hi. It just rained and now the sun is out.
Throwing
Nice.
shade at us. I was about to say थोड़े से वक्त में ज़्यादा कह सकने के प्रयास वाली podcast.
Is he insulting me? What is he doing?
No.
I don't know. He's saying,
Shardool,
he's saying something in Hindi. And also joining us from Kolkata, our wonderful senior editor from our partner organization News Minutes, Sudipto Mondal. Hi, Sudipto.
Hi, Abhinandan. Thanks for having me.
Yes, welcome.
Calcutta is on the boil.
Yes, thank you.
Winters.
I'm starting the conversation with Rahul. I just want to know a little bit about his novel. But before that, I would like to announce Hafta is outside the paywall this week. It is not behind the paywall. And that is because we are announcing a 26% discount on our joint subscription with News Minute and Newslaundry, if you're wondering why. The government of India, Modi ji, to support the print media, has raised print ad rates for Sarkari ads in print publications by 26% so that your hard-earned tax money can go on for more Sarkari ads with him and his colleagues' mugshots telling us how great they are. So when they go high on such things, we go low. So we have reduced our rate by 26% till the end of the month. So it's a good time not just to buy a subscription, but to demonstrate to these people that we are not so excited about you giving handouts to those people who sit on panels criticizing handouts to the poor, who are bloody living on handouts themselves. So you voluntarily can subscribe to news and journalism that is public funded and not Sarkari funded in the week where Sarkar raised the ad rates for print by 26%. We are dropping our subscription rate by 26% because we do stuff differently here, right? There's a QR code. While I'm saying all this, you can scan that. You can click on the link below and make this happen. It's important. Thank you. Now, before we get into the discussion and the headlines of the week, I hope we'll have you in our studio next week or the week after that to talk in more detail about your latest novel. But Rahul Pandita, Opcharik, a formal introduction. He's an award-winning journalist. I'm sure most of you already know who he is. He has worked for various publications, newspapers. I will not go into that. He has written one of the most authoritative books on the Maoist movement called Hello Bastar, the untold story of India's Maoist movement. And he has also written Our Moon Has Blood Clots, on which I had interviewed him on Newslaundry. The link for that interview is also in the show notes. You can buy both these books in the links that are provided with this. And his latest book is a novel. He has ventured into fiction, and it's called Our Friends in Good Houses. It's his debut as a novelist. So, why fiction from non-fiction, Rahul?
I mean, you were there in the launch, I talked about it. But,
yes, but audience who wasn't, I'd like them to know.
Of course. I was just preparing you for a repetition of what you've already heard.
Yes.
So, no, essentially, I've traveled a lot in the hinterland, right? And sometimes, you experience a lot while you're traveling in politically turbulent, volatile areas. And though I had the good fortune of working with some great editors who understood the concept of good writing and long-form journalism, etc., and who gave me the leeway to experiment with language. But still, I felt that there was a kind of an inadequacy between my experience in these areas and what I was able to put on, put in my journalistic dispatches. So I think this fiction is my way of coming to terms with that additional layer of meaning. And I think it's also to make myself understand, some of the things I have seen, to make sense to myself. I think it was E.M. Forrester who once said that, how do I know what I think until I see what I say. So I think the novel is my attempt to do so that I'm able to think about what I saw.
And I guess there's inevitably autobiographical in a lot of ways. Your protagonist, I've read the book for those of our viewers who are wondering how I know so much and I'm Antaryami, is doing a fellowship in the US as you had done, is from Kashmir as you are, has reported from Maoist areas as you have. So it's, I guess, really there's a lot of autobiographical elements in it. So is it that close to your real lived experiences, or it's more further from your lived experiences, or it's 50-50?
I think it's a 50-50. Also that, of course, any work of fiction has autobiographical elements. If Beckett had a murmur in his heart, so did his first character called Murphy. So you give and take from your own life. But I think more than my lived experience, what I've tried to do in this novel is to set the background in places which I'm comfortable with. So, of course, I know Kashmir, and of course, I know the Maoist terrain. So, you pick up things from here and there, especially in the first novel, right? The challenge, of course, now is to see what I do in my second novel, if I end up writing one at all.
Right. Actually, it always worries me when people say that your first novel is autobiographical, because I won't say halfway through, but I'm probably 1/3 through my first novel, which I've been working on for the last 2-3 years. And when people see what my protagonist is like, and if that indeed is true, that it's autobiographical, then I should quickly be hanged. Because my protagonist is such a wild piece of shit that I'm wondering, whenever people say this, I start saying, yaar, pata nahi yaar, maybe not yaar.
But that's your assessment of it, isn't
you're
it?
begging the obvious statement.
I think there is a human aspect to this here. First, we look inward, and once we sort of answer our inward questions which are inside us, only then we honestly look at people outside. There is no other way to do this.
Maybe. Let's see. Anyway.
Yeah.
Rahul, could I ask you a question though about the book, which is that,
Yes, please.
As someone who's been a journalist for a very long time and now to writing your first novel, I feel like in journalism, you're always very accountable to something else, right? Like truth or the subjects of your stories or whatever. So did it feel like very freeing to sort of throw all that away and write fiction? Like, what was the experience like?
I think it took me a little while to tell myself that I'm free from the rigor of journalism. That is what I was doing in a couple of my initial drafts. The novel contains some of my own experiences in Bastar and elsewhere. And what I felt in hindsight, what I was doing in my initial drafts was I was still trying to be a journalist.
Yeah.
Which meant that, though I had the freedom to place some of these events independent of time and the chronology, I was still doing that. I think after 1.5 drafts, I realized that I don't have to do that in fiction. So in that way, it set me free. And the other thing is, the grass is always greener on the other side. I remember when I used to write, and I've done 3.5 books of nonfiction, which are essentially based on my own journalistic travel. And I would lock myself in a room and then go through tons and tons of notes, and then light a cigarette sometimes and say, oh my God, I wish I was writing fiction, because, I would just shut these notebooks and then go back to my mind, imagination, and I could imagine anything and then write from there. But then when I started writing fiction, I was like, oh my God, I wish I had access to my notebook so that I could, fill in my today's 1,500 words for the day. So I think both these genres provided enough challenge to me. But I think in terms of, that additional layer of meaning which I was talking to you about, I think because I was able to do that in fiction, in this novel, I think I'm really glad about the fact that I could do that.
Right.
Right. And I think if you really want to be liberated from accuracy and fact, you can always become an anchor.
Exactly.
A news anchor, you have that option. You've had that option in the past, I know for. So yeah. So and before we get to the headlines, Jayashree, Sudipto, are you at liberty to disclose what you're doing in Kolkata, or is it an undercover operation?
No, I'm kind of chasing a personal story.
Oh, the one you mentioned,
Which is
spoke to me about.
Yeah.
All right.
So I managed to trace one part of the family. I'm now able to track down the family in Bangladesh. We'll see. And I'm trying to do this because this is the best time to look at Bangladesh or go to Bangladesh, and this is the worst time to go to Bangladesh. So, I mean, the borders are now massing with people who are leaving because of this SIR thing. Scouts are running amok at the borders, the border checkposts, harassing people who are fleeing and going back to Bangladesh. All of that stuff is happening, in the middle of which I'm trying to find that side of the family.
Oh, great. I think this will make a fantastic conversation when you're back. Look forward to that.
I don't know if I'll go at all, because if I don't find a clue on the other side, what will I go saying?
That's true. Yep. Anyway, good luck. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, Jayashree, let's get the headlines.
Yep. So here are the headlines of the week. Hidma, one of the commanders of the CPI Maoist, was killed in a police encounter in Andhra Pradesh. 6 Maoists were killed in the operation, including Hidma's wife. A powerful blast at the Naugam police station in Srinagar killed 9 people, including the police and forensic staff, and injured over 30 others. The police chief called it an accidental explosion, and an investigation is underway. In the Red Fort blast case, the chairman of Al-Falah University was arrested by the ED on money laundering charges. You'll remember that the suicide bomber in the blast worked at this university. The NIA has also arrested 4 more accused, bringing the total arrests in the case to 6. In Bihar, Nitish Kumar was sworn in as chief minister for a record 10th time, alongside 26 ministers. This is in a cabinet where the maximum strength can be 36. Samrat Chaudhary and Vijay Kumar Sinha retain their position as deputy CMs. The Supreme Court has asked the Commission for Air Quality Management to consider shifting sports activities scheduled in November and December to safer and less susceptible months. The amicus curiae said children are most at risk from pollution, and said that holding sports now is like putting them in gas chambers.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a few years ago, a relative of mine who was competing at state level. I mean, I went with him and I was like, you have a match at this time in this weather? They said, yeah, that's how it is. It's a disgrace.
It's a harebrained policy.
The way we treat our children, man, really, it's a disgrace.
Only a minuscule percentage of people can actually run and play sports. And when you perspirate, when you're tired, your lungs absorb more oxygen. So you are essentially
putting more
danger
toxins
and,
into them, yeah.
They are getting attacked more vigorously. The healthiest people are getting worse the earliest.
Meanwhile, when the Khelo India happened in Bihar, this year Khelo India was hosted in Bihar, obviously because elections are in Bihar.
Achha.
And the inauguration was done by Prime Minister Modi, where he made a speech about how he wants India to play more.
Yes.
And Nitish Kumar also added the 2 most sporty people I've ever come across in my life. First of all, did you know that if the child wasn't there for the inauguration, where to hear PM Modi talk about sport, you could not play the tournament? You could not land up for your match.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
That was the rule. The registration had to happen before the speech, and you had to be there for the speech. Because I guess Mr. Modi likes seeing full grounds.
Yes.
So yeah, congratulations, Mr. Modi. People in NCR will play Khelo a lot more, and their lungs will bless you and your completely useless environment minister. You're doing a great service to everybody.
You know, as a long distance runner, Abhi, I've stopped running in this weather now. I mean, I'm old now, and my lungs can't take it any longer. But we faced this pollution for several years now, and in the past few years, I have of course run through this weather, and then suddenly you go to a place where there's absolutely no pollution.
Yeah,
and then you run. I think about 5 to 6 years ago, I was in December. I was at Tanot in Jaisalmer along the India-Pakistan border, and I decided to run on this wild absolutely deserted path, which is manned by BSF. We got permission from the BSF, and I ran solo on that path because I always wanted to do that. And suddenly, after like 3-4 miles, I realized that I'm moving more quickly, and I can't hear my own wheezing sound. Then suddenly it came to me that I'm running in clean air, basically.
Yeah, makes a big difference.
It makes a hell lot of difference, yes.
Yep.
Well, meanwhile, the Supreme Court overturned its earlier order that prohibited the government from issuing environmental clearances to projects already underway. So effectively, this allows the centre to grant such clearances once again retrospectively. The Supreme Court also said that courts cannot set timelines for the president or governors to grant assent to bills. This is after President Draupadi Murmu moved a reference. She'd sought clarification on the court's judgment that had prescribed such timelines. Anmol Bishnoi, the younger brother of jailed gangster Lawrence Bishnoi, was arrested by the NIA on Wednesday. This is when he was brought to India following his deportation from the US. In Uttar Pradesh, a decade after the lynching of Muhammad Akhlaq, the state government has moved to withdraw charges against all the accused. He was lynched by a mob, which included the son of a local BJP leader. I mean, I found this a shocking case. I remember when it happened, everyone was so shocked. That was when all the writers decided to return their awards. The Modi government was really rattled. There was an election coming in Bihar. And now I feel this is barely even a blip. And I feel somebody had written this, but I'm forgetting whom. But I think this is the real report card of what the last years of Modi governance have been like, which is that this is such a normal sort of headline that we'll read and then we pass over.
Move on, correct.
In Jammu and Kashmir, the State Investigation Agency on Thursday raided the office of Kashmir Times. It alleged the newspaper's activities were inimical to the state. The editors have dismissed the charges as baseless, and they called the raid a coordinated crackdown that aimed at silencing the publication. Amid the EC's special intensive revision, a booth-level officer in Kerala died by suicide, allegedly due to work pressure. In protest, BLOs across Kerala boycotted work on November 17th. The Congress has also announced a protest rally against the exercise in Delhi in the first week of December. Donald Trump said the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman knew nothing about the 2018 killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. This is when he welcomed the prince to the White House. His remarks contradict the 2021 US intelligence assessment, which concluded the prince had approved the operation.
And when that journalist asked, I don't know whether you saw the clip in the White House, he says, "Why are you embarrassing our guest over here?" I mean, completely forgetting what he did to Zelensky, who was also a guest in the White House. And Donald
He
Trump...
also called that reporter a piggy, no?
Yeah,
Piggy.
quiet piggy.
Nice one. And finally, former Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been sentenced to death in absentia by the International Crimes Tribunal. The court found her guilty of incitement, ordering killings, and failing to prevent violence. And those are the headlines.
Right, thank you. Just want to remind you again that we have reduced our subscription rate 26% till the end of the month in celebration of the government hiking their ad rates that they give to print publications and newspapers by 26% using your money. So you can scan this QR code and tell the government you'd like to choose how you spend your money rather than them paying for their mugshots. Right. So coming to the two big, headlines of the week, Rahul, I guess this must be a depressing. I mean, I don't know if you suddenly have received a bunch of requests to write a piece or appear on shows. I know you decline many panel discussions on broadcast. But on this entire Maoist, cleanup, so to speak, which is happening, and on Kashmir, and you have been an area expert on both these issues, and both these issues are headlines this week. Let's start with Hidma's killing, and before that, there were several surrenders in the last few weeks. Tell us, you have been there. I'm assuming you have met many of these people. What do you make of it? And is this an inevitable outcome of a clash between a state and a community which has chosen violence, depending on who you listen to, inevitably, because nothing else is left? And this is that inevitable outcome of that kind of clash? Or is this a blip but can come up again because the fundamental causes are not sorted out?
Let me try and explain some of this through a story, Abhi. I've never met Hidma per se, but I've met a man who recruited him. He's a man called Badranna, who in many ways is the first recruit from Chhattisgarh. He's among the first batch of people, adivasis, recruited by the Maoists in Chhattisgarh. He comes from a village called Palmed, which is very close to Andhra. So he recruited Hidma when Hidma was a 10-year-old boy, and he was recruited as part of the Maoist, what they call the Bal Sangat, which is their, the children unit, basically. And then from there, he rises quite steadily. He's sent to Balaghat in Madhya Pradesh, which is a Naxal-affected district. Then takes over Bastar in many ways, meets, then becomes the deputy commander of one of their foremost battalions, and then finally takes over the PLGA as their, the most efficient military battalion, which undertakes most of their attacks, including the biggest attacks you would have heard of in the last few years. So Badarana was young himself when the first batch of Maoists came knocking at his door in Palmed. And he was reminded of those times. He recalled those times. He had surrendered later. I think in early 2000s, he surrendered along with his wife, who was also a Maoist guerrilla. So when I went to meet him, I found a pet parrot in their house. And he told me of the time that when the Maoist guerrillas came for the first time. And, it was the initial time, and the Adivasis were very skeptical of these outsiders. And there was a myth around them that, they would make you drink a potion by which they would make you follow them. So they were very skeptical, and they would run away from Maoist guerrillas. But of course, through the passage of time, they gained the trust of Adivasis, and then, the entire region turned into this stronghold. Even after Badarana, many, many years after Badarana's surrender, and I'm talking about 15, 16 years after his surrender, I once went to his area of operation, his area of influence in Bastar. Again, 15, 16 years after his influence. And I spoke to old Adivasi men and women about him. And they remembered him. He was extremely popular in those areas. So my whole point of telling you this story is that one reason why we are witnessing this downfall now of the CPM Maoists is that they somehow in the passage of this time steered away from what they had set out to do, which is to basically protect the Adivasis, protect their natural resources. But during this course, I think that they became obsessed about fighting the state. And of course, they became, in their own ways, stakeholders in these natural resources. So that is the tragedy of the CPM Maoist. And of course, as Hidma and others are concerned, I think we had seen it. It was just a matter of time because, the entire structure of CPM Maoist has come to an end now. And it was just a matter of time before he would surrender or he would be killed. But unfortunately, in this case, he has been killed. We have seen, it's really started from 2010 onwards during Mr. P. Chidambaram's time. But of course, in the last few years, there's a purpose to this. What has also helped the Indian state is the formation of what they call the Bastariya Battalion, which is essentially a force, which is like a part 2 of Salva Judo. Salva Judo was a complete failure, as we know. But somehow this Bastariya Battalion has worked in favor of the Indian state because it comprises of young Adivasis who, of course, come from the same society, from the same villages. And many of them are a significant component of this battalion is also surrendered Maoists. So obviously they know the terrain, etc., etc. And I think I also get the sense that in the last at least couple of years, the police, the Chhattisgarh police especially, has worked very hard in breaking the ranks and files of the Maoist guerrillas. I think they have made inroads into especially the company from where the bodyguards of important leaders, significant central committee leaders come. And this is why, you've seen so many central committee leaders being killed in the last few months, including the General Secretary, which if you had asked me, say about 5 years ago, I would have found it unbelievable. But it has happened. Now, of course, the bigger question, that is where you finished your question, is that what happens to Bastar once the Maoists are gone? They are as good as gone now, frankly. What happens now? Now, that is a fear which many, who have followed Bastar for a very long time have. That, is this the end game? What happens after the Maoists are over? So many activists, well-wishers of Bastar feel that it is just a ruse for the corporates to take over the land and the natural resources beneath it. But come what may, as a well-wisher of Bastar, I hope that at least a part of this largest, this natural resources comes to the rescue of the adivasis there, and they progress and benefit from some of these resources.
Right.
Do you think that's likely, though? I mean, I know that's what the fondest hope would be, that would happen. But given that these regions are still some of the poorest and more underdeveloped, and they're sort of bearing this heaviest of burdens, and especially when the movement itself sort of comes from this injustice and deprivation, even though it sort of spiraled into violence after that. But do you even see that happening? Because I think I'd read it in, I think The Wire, or somebody had reported that after they'd regained control of a forest in Gadchiroli, the Fadnavis government, but they sort of handed over that land to Lloyd Steel. So would we not sort of anticipate that to happen anyway with the government, especially when it's got lots of friends in corporate places?
I think we are. But it's also true that some development has taken place there in the last few years, especially in terms of road building, the introduction of electricity in many areas, introduction of mobile networks, etc., the formation of many schools for Adivasis, especially in the Bastar region and Gadchiroli, which you're talking about. So obviously some of it is gone. Now one can argue about why a development of a certain kind has come, because the Maoists allege that this development has only happened because the Indian state wants better roads for the forces to come in between. But from my experience, I know that it has also benefited the Adivasis. For example, in the cutoff region in Odisha, in Malkangiri district, remember this is the place where a district collector was abducted by Maoists in the February of 2011.
Mm-hmm.
An officer called Vinil Krishna. Now, this is a cluster of 151 villages, which was completely cut off from mainland Orissa. It only had a little access from the side of Andhra. Now, a bridge over a river called Gurupriya, which was in the docks for many, many years, they had planned it, but they could not make it. I think they finally made it during the COVID time, 2021-22. And it has completely changed the life and fate of the Adivasis in these 151 villages. So it would be unfair, in my view, to say that, only the corporates will take this. Of course, now, the natural resources, if the corporates take it, and I hope not, that is a different matter. But at least in terms of some basic development, which these regions really, really badly wanted. I mean, and that has also helped the Indian state in many ways. I personally remember, know people who got to see the outside world on their mobiles. We also have to kind of understand the kind of poverty we are talking about. It is not the poverty we see in cities here. That poverty, that marginalization is absolute. It is sometimes beyond our imagination. I mean, in my experience, I know of a very committed Maoist guerrilla who was sent to a very small town for the first time. And when he saw that small town, very small, 5 or 6 shops, the glamour of it hit him so much that he never went back to the Maoist party. And he is now with the police helping them on the border of Telangana and Chhattisgarh to fight the Maoists. So, that kind of marginalization, deprivation you're looking at.
Yeah, I had spoken to journalists who had met people, they'd never seen an automobile. I'm talking about 12, 15 years ago. I was shocked that, in the mid 2000s. But Sudipto, you've, also reported and written and spoken about this. What do you make of this purge?
Yeah.
It is, from a national security point of view, the way the Home Minister describes it, as a huge success. I mean, I honestly have no credible way of knowing this other than experts like Rahul and Sudipto who have covered this. But some, some situations are very difficult. There is no doubt these areas have been marginalized and ignored in a way which we cannot imagine till you actually speak to people who've been there. So, of course, it has to come up. But yet, the imbalance of power in India, where, and much as we criticize America, or even South Africa, I've myself seen a documentary where a tribe took on one of the largest corporations in the world who had taken over their historical land for burials, and they won the case and they got it back. I can't see an Adani or an Ambani losing a case even if they were to do something wrong. So, given that context, what do you make of it? And is the sympathetic lens on Maoism sometimes a little romanticized and self-indulgent? Or is it something that needs to be put out as a narrative? Otherwise, it would just be this complete villains, as if they are some empowered people who have amazing resources to take on the state.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to refer to some of the work I've already put out. They are in two parts. One is just a couple of articles I've done when I'd gone to cover the Chhattisgarh elections. And there were two big takeaways from that thing. One, that there was a bipartisan consensus on Hindutva, and in the name of different things. I mean, in the sense that the Sanghis or the BJP would look at Hindutva in the way we know, but then you had Bhupesh Baghel. So Bhupesh Baghel came up with this idea of this Ram Van Gaman Path. And his father actually was an anti-caste activist, who was more in favor of tribal deities and things like that. Some of that was focused on how, my work was focused on how the BJP and the Congress were both doing this one kind of Hindutva. And then I also got into this question of what are the Maoists doing in this entire thing? Because one of the things I've noticed about the areas where the Maoist party is, present in significant numbers, has some influence, also overlaps with areas where the Vanvasi Kalyan Ashram and the other Sangh projects are working. How do they manage to coexist? Why do we not hear of more Maoist? Well, it's not like I'm saying it's desirable their violence, but we've never heard of a Maoist attack on some Ekalavya project, right? So that was one of the things that was the area of my focus in that elections. But more recently, since this latest Operation Kagar and all of this started, I've been in touch. And see, my instinct whenever I go into the field, my instinct is to basically do a small little deviation from what a typical Savarna reporter would do, which is I avoid I avoid all as many sources as possible who are from those elite sections, even though their ideology, they might identify as left, they might identify as progressive, they might identify as human rights activists, but I tend to steer clear of that and go into the place looking for voices who are, from the communities and representing from the ground. So on this occasion, when this violence and this Kagar thing started, I started talking to three very important people in Chhattisgarh: Manish Kunjam, Soni Sori, and Digri Prasad Chauhan. And these people started saying some very interesting things about the Maoist party and about the civil society groups which suddenly became very active against the Kagar operation. Manish Kunjam, who is very well respected even by the Maoist party, they keep referring to him as Dada. He is somebody who has on multiple occasions tried to bring them into the mainstream, invite them for peace talks, and failed. So one of his first reactions when the civil society groups, Har Gopal, Bela Bhatia, this whole crowd, they came out and said, "Oh well, the state is once again, going on this final solution kind of a path." Manish Kunjam turned around and said that, "Hey, when the killing was happening of the ordinary cadres, and that has not stopped over the years, over the decades. They have consistently been mowed down by the security forces. The difference in this Kagar operation is that the leadership is getting wiped out. And now that the leadership is getting wiped out, you have their nominees or their, whatever, their spokespeople in the civil society groups from Hyderabad and Delhi, flying down to say that, hey, stop this operation. And that was a very, very surprising statement coming from Manish Punjam, because in the moment he said that, even the Maoist leadership responded to what he said and said that they were very hurt by what he said. And, but they didn't really challenge the foundation of his argument. Why? Because Manish was saying, when you guys were strong, you didn't want to surrender. And it was so ridiculous at one point, because the Maoist leadership, people like, there's this character called Rupesh who finally surrendered, right? So Rupesh, in his interviews to some of these outlets in Bastar, like Bastar Talkies, was saying things like, the security forces are coming after us, attacking us, but we have ceased fire. And how ridiculous. You are an armed group, you are in a military campaign, war against the state. The state is coming after you with guns and bombs. And at that point, you announce ceasefire, and what do you expect? That the state will just back off. Like, what is I mean, it's so ridiculous what Rupesh and some of the party members were saying at that point. And ultimately, what happens? Rupesh also surrenders. Right. So this is one aspect of the critique that came. Then came this entire conflict or contest of ideas within the civil society universe itself, where Bela Bhatia and Soni Sori had a run-in, where, Bela Bhatia started saying that, oh, well, these are people who are compromised with the state, because Soni Sori and all of that have had enough of this, going up against and banging your head against the state. They've taken a more pragmatic line. They all these three people, Manish, Digri, and Soni, they take a more pragmatic line, and they're not as strident as the Delhi Hyderabad activists. And so there was some unbun that happened between them. And ultimately, Soni goes on to float another organization, which is called CAJE or something, Chhattisgarh Alliance for Justice and Equality or something, All of this shows what? That there is a contradiction, there is a basic fault line in that movement and in the human rights movement, which is that the leadership, the faces of those movements are all from outside. Whether it's a Bela Bhatia, Kavita, or that whole, Haragopal and all of them, or people who are in the leadership of the party, the general secretary who got killed, and so many others. Against this backdrop emerges this character called Hidma. And on this particular aspect, I've done these 2 What's Yourism episodes with Haragopal and with Digri Prasad Chauhan. Now, again, from the Dalit Adivasi local rooted leadership of Chhattisgarh, civil society leadership, one of the other things that came about Hidma was that here, look at the party. It has not managed to create a central committee member, Politburo member from the Adivasi community in decades. Hidma is one of the few people in that core formation. So much for their Adivasi movement. They have not been able to create a leadership among the Adivasis. Hidma has come to that position of leadership through a process of elimination of the rest of the leadership. People kept dying, posts started getting vacant, and he kept getting pushed up. That is a narrative in those circles, like I said. And they say, now that your party is on its last legs, finally you are trying to project this leader as, the face of the party.
The authentic indigenous leadership.
Some last little authenticity, some legitimacy, some credibility, saying that, hey, here's your Adivasi leader. This is your guy. Now, this is the guy who is the face of the movement, and this is the face of the fight and all that. And that was described as a very mealy-mouthed kind of line to take by the party. And to then also, people like Soni were saying, Hidma, just surrender, come out. These people are turning you into the bullseye. करना जो था इन लोगों को इतने सालों से कर लिए अब तुमको दिखा रहे हैं कि तुम कमांडर हो लास्ट बटालियन
and Soni was right. That's inevitably what happened.
Soni was right. Soni was right because the others surrendered. So many of these fellows surrendered. All these Telugu, Andhra people, upper caste people, they all surrendered. And the Delhi civil rights people, anyway, whatever, they couldn't arrange for his peaceful surrender, no? Finally, it's their failure also. If he died in an encounter, it is a failure of a Haragopal or a Bela Bhatia or whoever, Nandini Sundar or Kavita Srivastava. All these people who have been holding press conferences in Delhi and Hyderabad, they have to explain for why they couldn't facilitate the surrender of a man, from Telangana. Congress is in power over there, no?
It would be a very interesting, actually, film. Of course, it's very difficult to make a film that kind of glides through the complexities of a child soldier becoming this dreaded, Maoist leader. But
Yeah,
before
there was a thing. Sorry, Abhinandan. Just one line just to capture this thing. The Maoists describe him as the student of a revolution or the student of the revolution or whatever, and I call him the child of war. A boy who was 14 years old joined this movement, right? And after that, and it is just so. How are child soldiers and child fathers? Okay, there is so much for this party to answer. This party has so much to answer for. And the last point I want to make is what finally defeated the Maoist party. It is not technology. It is betrayal, right? Betrayal can mean two things. Oh, traitor, vagera, vagera. Betrayal can also mean that people wisened up to the ideological contradictions, because the entire DRG, Rahul talked about some what's Bastar Battalion.
Yeah,
As far as I know,
same.
it's the DRG, the District Reserve Guard, right? These were almost entirely 90% made up of surrendered Maoists. Now, are you telling me that every surrendered Maoist is a turncoat, mercenary, backstabber? If they are, then how did they first get into the Maoist movement at all? So when they joined the Maoist movement, they were revolutionaries. When they figured out their contradictions that came out, they became backstabbers. And that DRG is essentially what broke the back of the Maoist party. So therefore, it was in a way defeated by its own people. And that's the tragedy, that's the irony, that's the biggest example of the party's contradiction.
Right.
No, two things here, Abhi. To complement what our friend here said, there are two strands of conversation here. One is, of course, so I'm not getting into one because, that's a completely different episode. But to just briefly touch upon this, there's also in many areas, it's also turf war in many ways. So on one hand, in places like Odisha, for example, there are Hindutva organizations. Then there are church organizations. And in the middle of this, there's a Maoist party. So it's ultimately, who is the boss of that area. And there's no place which proves it more clearly than Kandhamar, where Swami Lakshmanan Saraswati was killed in 2008 by Maoists. Many believe on a supari by church organizations, and that led to the Kandhamal riots. Now, that's a completely different story. We don't have time for that. But there is, of course, truth in the other strand of conversation our friend just had, which is to say, even if you look at Bhima Koregaon case, for example, the entire machinery, the lawyers, etc., they came to rescue of people like Sudha Bhardwaj and Gautam Naulakha, the urban the urban elite, the urban people accused in this case, and of course fairly, and now they're out. But I know people who are still inside. There's absolutely no conversation about them. There's a man called Surendra Gardeling who is a Dalit, who is a lawyer, who is accused in this case. He has spent years and years in jail. Now, who is going to speak for him? The other thing is that Comrade Sonu, for example, Sonu is he's Kishanji's brother, one of the most important central committee leaders of the CPI Maoists, who has spent about 50 years inside the movement. He's among the first batch of Maoists who entered, who was sent by Kondapalli Sitaramaiah himself. Now, Kishanji is dead, he died in November 2011. Now, suddenly, after spending 50 years inside the movement, giving his youth to whatever, we can have ideological differences with him, but he has spent 50 years in that. And jungle life is very difficult, right? And suddenly he has decided to surrender. Now, of course, there are overground workers and sympathizers.
It's his partner.
For whom Maoism is theory, They will be somewhere on the College Street right now where our friend is sipping coffee and calling him a traitor. I have seen Facebook posts where, they put Kishanji's picture on one side and Sonu's picture on one side, hailing Kishanji as a hero and Sonu as a traitor. Come on. have a little respect for
Yeah.
the wisdom of a man who has spent 50 years inside the jungle. And then he has realized the futility of the movement, and he has realized that they need to save the remaining adivasis from this terrible war between the Indian state and the Maoist guerrillas. I think, to me, in the entire movement today, I think I've not met him yet after his surrender. But when I get a chance to meet him, I will tell him that you're the wisest man in the CPI Maoist, Sonu.
Can I just contradict that? I mean, I want to contradict it in terms of, in the same terms, saying if a person takes 50 years to wisen up, right, in the course of which hundreds and maybe thousands have been killed. And let's not forget that here's a party which reserves the worst for people who quit in the way that Sonu did. Right? He himself, I'm sure, has ordered many such executions, because the worst in the Maoist party is reserved for traitors, informers, and all of that. Now, my thing is that here's an upper caste outsider man who's not from that region, comes and starts a quote unquote revolution, right? In which a majority of the people who die are the people who are quote unquote trying to save. I cannot romanticize. I cannot say, "Hey, good job, thumbs up. You're a wise man." Right? Where was your wisdom when blood was flowing? Where was your wisdom when, the state was any day more powerful than you, and your revolution itself had many holes? Right? Now, coming back to this thing of, they would do these knee-jerk kind of responses to, say, caste violence, and, Rahul, he gave this example of the killing of in Kandamal and all of that. There was a similar killing in Karamchedu. So in Karamchedu, there was a Dalit massacre by a person who is a grand uncle of your Rana Daggubati. This chap called Daggubati Chanchu Ramaya. He was the person who was the main, guy who was behind this massacre of Dalits in Karamchedu. And to avenge that killing, the Maoists came and shot dead this fellow. Okay. Now the backlash, the kind of crackdown that happened by the Greyhounds and the other police forces at that time on legitimate Dalit activism, purely because of the fact that they made this connection that Dalits have become Maoists, right? My only thing is that at different points in time, the weakest sections of society, Dalits, Adivasis, in this Telangana, in Chhattisgarh, and all these places where these people have been active, legitimate activism from them has resulted in terrible violence from both Maoists and the state. People like Soni Sori, Kunjam, Jigli Prasad will testify to this. Right? So I'm not going to shed a tear for any of these people.
So if I just want to bring the other panelists in and then come to Rahul once before we quickly, I just want to discuss one aspect of the Kashmir, terrorism that happened in Delhi. But on this, I think it's always a complicated thing about, is after 50 years turn around. Like, for example, even I sometimes wrestle with many journalists who I've known for a long time, some who are in their 70s, a couple maybe pushing 80, who suddenly have gone very quiet or kind of, soft, comply with the diktat of the time. And I'm like, what happened to the fight for journalistic values? And I have spoken to one who I still respect, although that person has become very quiet, even if not compliant. I think sometimes we forget the fatigue of a human being as opposed to the energy of an ideologue. I don't know, I must have participated in dozens of. The first time me and Rahul spoke is because he wanted to interview me as one of the protesters of the Jan Lokpal movement. I think you were doing a piece for Open. And I was one of the key people who was creating havoc at Jantar Mantar. I'm not going to go there anymore. I don't. People call me for protests. I'm not old, but I'm old enough not to do gheraos anymore. Maybe at 80, I won't even want to fight for pay to keep news free. I don't know. What I'm saying is, it's always a complicated kind of space. And of course, when the stakes are higher, the judgment is higher. But yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to maybe explore in a long form documentary, a piece, a film, I don't know. But, before I come back to our two experts and move on to Kashmir quickly, Shardool, on this issue, would you have anything to add? Although I'm just so informed by the two guests we've chosen. I'm glad we haven't. To our audience, you may need to Google many of these people they've mentioned and places. I know some of them purely because I've been around so long. And that will improve the algorithm of a YouTube. You'll stop getting those pop-ups of why creatine is good for your brain. And you may get pop-ups of news that you should know about. But yeah, go ahead, Shardool.
Well, apologies for my voice. Delhi air has gotten to me. So Rahul brought up a point I was thinking about making. And that also comes up into Sudipto's point, and you also said it. Like, if you remember the last time we were talking about this, so even then the point had come up that there is a finite time, a finite level that you can stop the progress. Ultimately, some level of progress will reach you by some means. Of course, it depends on geography, it depends on the state, it depends on what kind of opposition is there and what kind of exploitation is happening. But still, something will happen. And the moment a war continues, like to start a fight, like you said, ideological fight or fight for journalism, it takes a very different human being to continue that fight for a long time, because war changes you. Because ultimately we are human beings. That factionism, that if you call it in Hindi, varchasva ki ladai, that tribalism, that comes up. And human beings are, we are designed primarily to serve ourselves. And if you have exercised power, let's say for 2 districts in Bastar, where the progress hasn't come because of you or because of the overall movement, but people now started to, realize that we can have this. So now your goals are not aligned anymore. And these things again come, of course, there are bigger points in it of marginalized societies. But human beings are human beings. Everybody ultimately wants to be like my family and me. I want to live better life. And like you said, ultimately people think like, there comes a time in everybody's life, and people who talk about this idealism, like as Sudipto was saying, that on putting on Facebook, these are traitors and all. These are people who have never been into fights. Like and I know, like fighting for a long time for anything, it takes a lot out of you. It changes you permanently in many ways. And of course, people want to live the culmination of life. Like he spent talking about Sonu, 50 years in the forest. He doesn't need anybody's approval for what can be done and what had to be done. No matter what you think about him, the culmination of his life, he wants to live in peace. Because that is ultimately what makes you happy.
Well, I guess Ashoka is one after Kaling war to embrace Buddhism. But yeah, Jayashree, your comments before we go back to our two guests.
Just one very small thing, which is that, Sudipto, I think quite rightly was explaining how the party has so much to answer for. And I think, but one thing that we should also never really forget is the state has too much to answer for also. And that is something that we should be querying constantly. I think at Newslaundry itself, we've published, off the top of my head, at least 15 or 20 stories by Pratik on, villagers being branded Maoist by the state, being taken away, being killed with little or no proof. I feel they've become this sort of collateral damage in this war. And Rahul brought up the Bhima Karagaon accused. I think we should constantly query the state's treatment of people it claims are Naxal sympathizers. And if killing of innocents delegitimizes Maoists as it should also delegitimize the state. And I think the state's monopoly on violence should be exercised with tremendous caution and maximal restraint. And instead, in this entire war on left-wing extremism, I feel like we've seen the opposite. So, and violence of the state and violence of the citizen are not the same.
Yeah, also, I completely agree.
And one final thing, which is my issue with a lot of the media coverage of these events, and of course, it's very difficult there is very authentic journalism that comes out of these parts, but also, by and large, your newspapers, your websites, and so on, it's so unreliable. It's either accounts that are from top cops, and therefore they're like 2-line updates of what has happened, 5 killed, and then you have so little context to go on, but it's just covered and reported as is. Or you have that sort of glorified coverage, and I saw a lot of it in the last couple of days, which is like the birds had fallen quiet, but now the birds of the jungle sing again. And I just hate this men's adventure account of something that is so violent and so tragic and is told with absolutely no context. And finally, I think I am by nature a very suspicious person. I think any right thinking person in India should be suspicious. So I am very suspicious of the state's accounts of who it's killed and why it's killed them and who has died in the process of it attempting to kill somebody who is very important or who is named, because I think armed insurgents don't exist in a vacuum. So
Right.
yeah.
So,
Now, on this, I just want 2 minutes from Rahul and Sudipto, and then I want to move on to Kashmir.
I
Please.
just had one statement, one line.
Abhi, a couple of things, Abhi. So, with what Sudipto said, there's absolutely no contradiction. He's right. But when I was referring to Comrade Sonu, I meant it more in terms of what in Hindi is called "Der aaye durust aaye," right?
Yeah.
One day you realize. A couple of other things around it. Sometimes people who have spent so much time with the idea of violence or with the idea of a revolution, sometimes they don't know what to do with peace. And we have seen this in case of Prabhakaran, for example, in Sri Lanka, right? Prabhakaran got many chances to kind of come to an understanding with the Sri Lankan government through the Norwegian government, etc. There were too many intermediaries who could have ensured peace between two parties. But then he chose not to, and then what happened to him in 2009. I remember traveling with a Maoist party right after Prabhakaran was killed in Sri Lanka, and there were discussions around it, about whether the Maoist party should learn any lesson from what happened to Prabhakaran. And of course, they chose not to. From my long experience with them, I know many people tried. Especially around 2009-10, there were many people, track 2, track 3, we often use this in context of Kashmir, but even in, Maoist areas, there were many efforts by well-meaning people to do that. But I think the Maoist party was not, serious. The Indian state was partially serious and partially not. But a larger, a couple of things we must also remember. One is that, of course, ideological differences with violence, etc., that is all fine. But we must also understand why something like Maoism flourishes for a very long time. There are a couple of reasons in my view. One is the Indian state's absolute allergy to non-violent movements in this country, and the abject failure of mainstream left parties in India, which has given rise to something like naxalism. But having said that, we must also remember to give just 1% credit to Maoists. If it were not for Maoists, you and I would not have been talking about this region at all.
Yeah, but
there
would have been completely wiped out.
There would be no roads, no telephone networks, no tribal schools, nothing.
Right.
So we must remember that as we end this discussion.
Sure. Last word to you, Sudipto, before I move to Kashmir.
Yeah, so I suppose I just want to one basic summary of what I all said so far is that I'm talking about appropriation, and I'm talking about who represents the interests of whom, right? In the case of, Jayashree was talking about bringing focus upon the state, but from my gaze, to me, the state, civil society, and the Maoist leadership is made up of the same sections of society, right? The state is not an amorphous, like just one, building block. It is made up of individuals. It's an institution that's made up of individuals, and those individuals invariably, whether it's a superintendent of police or the general secretary of the party or the spokesperson of a civil rights group, right? How do they invariably happen to be Savarna is a question, I suppose, that is a ideological challenge for all these things. The state has an ideology, civil society has an ideology, and the Maoists have an ideology. How is it that this happens is one thing. And in the context of Bhima Koregaon, it's a great example. It's a pilgrimage, a Dalit pilgrimage, an Ambedkarite pilgrimage that's been happening for close to a century. And enter these outsiders from Delhi, Vagera, doing their Lal Salam and whatever the hell, and they appropriate that thing. And then before you know it, the state cracks down. The state never cracked down in these decades, close to a century, that Dalits were doing the same pilgrimage, right? And I just want to, quickly, if possible, read out from one person who's the most articulate on this subject, a section from his writing, Bal Gopal, who's written critique these people, the rebels, very sharply. He says rebels who employ violence systematically often attribute their decisions to the quote-unquote people. But the people in truth have little say in the matter. They become spectators of the political process, which is a denial of an essential democratic right. Those who agree with the rebels may well be content, and to the extent that the majority agree with them, the contentment may appear universal. But contentment is no substitute for democracy, a fact that comes alive the day the agreement ceases. What Balgopal is basically warning us about is that this isn't just about violence, it is about the political control behind it. When guns speak, ordinary people stop being political agents, they become bodies in somebody else's war. And the worst part about the Maoist movement is that it follows that one basic principle of armed conflict, which is that the people sending people to war are old men, the people going to war are young boys.
Right. I'd like to do a longer discussion on this. Maybe we should do it next week or week after next, because there's just so many questions I have in my head. But if I may just move on to the Kashmir issue now, I'd like to start off with Shardool. I don't want to discuss the whole thing because we're already over an hour, but there's this one aspect of this new, which our Prime Minister very casually, who was it? No, I think it was a cop who said that the intellectuals are more dangerous than the uneducated violent terrorists, etc.
The police told the court, I think.
Yes, I mean, it's all sorts of bizarre statements.
And that chicken neck story.
Yeah.
So there was a video of Dr. Omar justifying suicide attacks, and there has been discussion on should it be shown by responsible journalistic organizations or platforms. One school of thought says that actually encourages others. It can be a motivational factor, or it could be a factor that causes hate. Yet others say that it is something that actually shows you that how an apparently reasonable, rational, educated person can also get radicalized. So it is a good warning. So I just like this panel to, tell us what they think, because all are or have been journalists at some point, that how would they measure whether something like this being aired or broadcast or put online by news organization, is it irresponsible or is it journalistically important? Shardul, when do you start?
So the first thing, I am autistic, I need to finish my thought, but thankfully this connects to the previous discussion. So if you talk about we should air that video or not, one, he's the person in that video.
Dr. Omar.
Yeah, I didn't want to say name. Anybody, it could be anybody. In different contexts, this has happened a few months earlier too, when a guy had killed himself because of the fight with his wife.
Yes, I remember that.
So this is not a healthy mind you're looking at. This is a mind ruminating on its fantasies of extremes, fantasies of ending himself. There are delusions of grandeur in it also. Now, the question you ask is, should we air it? Now, generally, when this question is asked, I always fall, because Indian state is very parental. Ye mat karo, wo mat karo, ye mat dikhao. And they don't trust people. I generally fall on the side that we should trust people. People are generally sane enough to worry about their own benefit. Rest of it is other people's business. But this is a very different thing, because this is a terror module thing now. So I'm not sure we should air it or not. But there are 2 points to this. One, and the one point which connects to the previous discussion is, even if the armed conflict, you manage to eliminate it completely, the fundamental issues, until they are addressed, the fight will continue.
In some way or the other.
And it's the wisdom of those the people who are fighting is to manage their fight in a way which they can sustain themselves and grow in a long way, which in my head right now is non-violent. But this terror thing is another problem, because you have sort of choked a community, and we have also done reports on this. Now, there are ideological differences, yes. There are some very extreme differences and minor sort of corollaries of these thoughts. But if you choke even the thought process, the civil discussion, which is called in common parlance, or general discussion on ideas which may not be acceptable, if everything is very neatly and strictly cordoned off in society about discussion, about what's happening to us, how we should govern ourselves. Now, center does not need to decide how a district or a mohalla or a nigam should be governed in Kashmir.
Mhm.
There are bigger things to do in life for a prime minister or for a union government. But because after the removal of 370, everything is so strict and cordoned off. There are outlets which you will find ke is tarah ka thought it breeds up. And other point is, there is a disproportionate number of engineers, PCM or science people it's been seen, at least in Western Europe, who are influenced by extremism, because they sort of learn through education, quote unquote education, the problem solving of their subject. It's a subject specific intelligence, but what they don't learn about is like society and how social
arts,
contexts work.
Of all the people, even Elon Musk had said that he'd make history compulsory reading and not just science because it gives you context. I was like, okay, wow, Mr. Musk. But Jayashree, yours video to see or not to see, to show or not to show?
But to
See,
finish my point,
the-
it should be shown. You may edit some parts which you think may be problematic for general public.
Okay.
See, this is a very good theoretical discussion to have if you're like a normal society where your television news is showing you normal things. I think one, Indian state is too paternalistic as it is. It loves to tell us what we must do and what we must not do and how we must respect our elders and we must not do this and that. So that's one. Two, also, I'm sorry, but given the level of rubbish that is passed off as news on a daily basis, to say that, oh, this is inciting and this is hateful and this will have an alarming impact on the minds of all these hardworking people watching it is absurd. I think you place it in context, you air it, then by that logic, you shouldn't be selling half the books that are sold in India. You shouldn't be airing half the shows that we are seeing in India. In a theoretical discussion, I would say you cannot assume all people are stupid. People are allowed to make up their minds on pieces of context, on content. But yes, you give the context as to what the video is and why it was made, and then you air it. But none of this, I would say, applies to Indian news. So,
Right. Sudipto?
Well, as a reporter, my job is to put out the news, not law and order, no? And I am committed to preserving law and order to the extent that I will not put out lies. But if it's the truth, and if the truth is threatening law and order, so then that's not my problem. That's the state's problem.
Right.
Absolutely. Like that has been a principle in the best of times, in the worst of times. The state, the police, the Thulla is responsible for ensuring that there's no stabbing on the street. And that job is something that this person is always failing at doing. Okay. So, taking that into consideration, I will always err on the side of some truths which you can establish, put it out, let the public deal with it. It came from the public.
Right. Rahul?
A couple of things, Abhi. I was trying to draw a comparison between Umar Nabi's video and the video of the Pulwama suicide bomber, Adil Dar. Now, if you compare these two videos, it's very clear that Adil Dar's video is very performative, There's a flag behind him. He's wearing military fatigues, black fatigues. He has a rifle, hand grenades in front of him for effect. And he's speaking in a certain theatrical way, And his video, in many ways, is meant to rattle the Indian state.
It's a press release.
It's a press release of a certain sort, It is a press release like, I remember, Bill Clinton had come to India in the year 2000. And there was this small left-leaning organizations from Shakarpur and Lakshminagar, which put out a press release saying कि हम Bill Clinton को खबरदार करते हैं कि खबरदार अगर वो लक्ष्मीनगर शकरपुर में अपना कदम रखे तो हमसे बुरा कोई नहीं होगा. So it's meant to be but of course very dangerously performative in that sense. But Nabi's video, if you watch carefully, it is, in the first place, it looks as if he's sitting in a philosophy podcast, talking about metaphysics rather than martyrdom. But there's a very, very layered meaning in the way he's speaking. His video is crafted for those who might want to see themselves in him. It's an attempt to normalize his radicalization and to make it seem very rational and achievable. That is where the danger of that video lies. But having said that, I think all of us have a right to know what we are dealing with.
Hmm.
And censorship of this sort does not work at all. I know from anecdotal evidence that the video is already circulating in WhatsApp groups in Kashmir and many other parts. It's already been saved on many smartphones and it's making its rounds. So censorship in today's day and age doesn't work at all. And I think it should be aired to make people aware of what they are dealing with.
Right.
Especially, domestic terror modules of this kind is nothing new. We have had small units in places like West Bengal, Bareilly, Saharanpur, on the outskirts of Delhi. ISIS modules, small ISIS modules. Two people got together, tried to put together something with matchbox, blow themselves up, stuff like that. But this is a danger of a different kind, especially when people involved have white collar jobs like the doctor. Doctors in Kashmir and in rest of India also have a certain social currency. Agar aap, generally if you say, okay, he's a Kashmiri Muslim, I will not give him a room in Delhi. It happens many times. There's a bias against Muslims, especially Kashmiri Muslims. But then you look at, I think one of the tenants made this point, house owners made this point, that, he was a doctor, he looked like a doctor, he signed it and he gave me advance. So then there is this danger. It's a danger that even, these modules, if they're working like this, and they've chosen this place really well, it is away from the glare of the heartland in Delhi, the city in Delhi, but it's close enough for them to be able to reach Delhi in an hour's time. So I think it's a danger which we must take very, very seriously.
So, okay, so just one, I still don't have a thought through position, although I loved Sudipto's disarmingly simple logic of, as a journalist, what one's duty is, and I'm leaning that way. I'll probably think about it tonight before I sleep. But just one thing that I found interesting, where the surprise that educated people like doctors, etc., the surprise that, this is a new thing, and I saw how mainstream media covered it. To me, that is an acknowledgement that the likelihood of someone who's unemployed, uneducated, and poor to turn to violence is high, which means there's a logic to it. Either one should have equal surprise whether a completely disempowered person who has no prospects in life looks at turning to violence, and a doctor, one measures it the same. But if one measures it differently, I think that is an acknowledgement, whether we put it in those many words or not, that the failure of providing basic human decency and justice to people will make them turn to violence is implicit in that surprise. And if it is implicit in that surprise, when someone turns around and says that, what do you expect if you don't give someone this? And then that Shashi Kapoor dialogue from Diwar comes, kitne bhooke nange hain, sab chor to nahi ban jate. You cannot hold those two thoughts in your head consistently. So if you are surprised at this, then you should not be surprised at the most marginalized taking up violence. And if you're not surprised at this, then you can be equally surprised. So I find that interesting, and I would like to have a longer discussion on that at some point. But Sudipto, go ahead, and I'll give Shardool the last word on this, unless Rahul wants to say something.
I was just saying that I'm not surprised. And the educational profile of the militant, or in this case, whatever you might describe terrorist, militant, jo bhi term use karna hai, their educational profile, their social background does not make a difference, because we have been seeing people from all stratas of Kashmiri Muslim society taking to arms. It is not from today. We have decades of history. The JKLF, from there it starts, something. All of that history is there, and none of these people were quote unquote uneducated people. Far from that. In fact, they were highly educated in terms of, their political education was very, very of a very high level. And I have had the opportunity to go to Kashmir a few times, and do some basic journalistic groundwork. And the political clarity I have seen among the common people of Kashmir, Well, I mean, it is a message to anybody. If anybody sitting outside and imagining what Kashmiris want, just need to go to Kashmir and just, ask anybody on the street. So, and what the state has done also is quite evident. And so,
Hmm.
therefore, why are we surprised that an engineer becomes like this, or so what will it not be surprised if a shikara, isn't that called a shikara, those boats?
Yeah, Michael Sugar.
Like if a boatman becomes a militant, then it is,
Sure.
expected, and an engineer. All of Kashmir is suffering from this, and some of them choose to do this horrible thing. But then we have to see the root of this, no?
And yeah,
I don't see the Kashmir thing. Sorry to, I'm so sorry to go on too many words, but then quick point: there is a difference, essential material difference between the Kashmiri struggle and what is happening in this Bastar, Chhattisgarh, Dandakaranya
Yes.
region.
Sure.
And my critique is that the thing is that they were people from outside coming and leading this movement. You cannot say the same about the Kashmiri movement. Even the absence of outsiders, it has still managed to sustain over the years.
Although at its peak, there were a lot of
ISI.
outsiders involved. But
Oh,
yeah,
of course.
but Rahul, on Kashmir and on this, I think you had something to say before I come to Shardool. Please go ahead. And of course, you've seen the worst and suffered firsthand
Yes.
the violence and when the Hindu community was pushed out of Kashmir. So yeah,
No,
at least
I mean
on
that apart, of course.
Mm.
I mean, but a majority of militants who were from JKLF or Hizbul Mujahideen, they were vagrants.
Hmm.
They were illiterate. Fifth pass, sixth pass, plumbers. जो सड़क का गली छाप, सड़क छाप गुंडा type का है. Suddenly he gets a gun, and of course, then he steers towards one way. There were a few ideologues here and there who were educated, but it's towards the end of it, we in the last few years especially, we've seen also educated university graduates, etc., deviating towards it. But what is dangerous about this, in my view, is that it's not this doctor who chose to take up this path has not chosen Kashmir as a turf. Now it has gone outside the state,
right.
And it's a multi-state issue now. There's one base in Saharanpur, in Faridabad. Now they've gone and radicalized someone else in Saharanpur who was ready for it. So that is what the intelligence agencies and security agencies are now worried about, because it's not something which has restricted itself to Kashmir. It has gone out.
Right. Shardul.
Look, I'll say just one thing. Well-educated, especially science stream individuals in terrorism are not new. Ayman al-Zawahiri was a medical graduate from Cairo, and he remained the head of the terrorism in the world for a long time. So was Osama bin Laden, electrical engineer, if I remember, or mechanical, I'm not sure. But yeah, so these people were educated. But you have to understand, this skill-based education does not do anything for your sense of injustice if you feel it inside yourself.
Sure.
That's a personal thing. And you only deploy and use the means you have access to if you feel that sense of injustice. The job of the state and the injustice we talk about is to not let that injustice breed to a level, which is why you have to trust your people. Like हिंदुस्तानी सरकार, मैं हिंदी में बोल रहा हूँ, बट है ना, मन की बात हिंदी में निकलती है मेरी, तो अब मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता. जब आप ज्यादा दबाओगे ना किसी को, तो फिर वो पलट के झापड़ ही मारता है.
Yeah, you can't corner someone to say that the person has no options left. So, Jayashree, if you have anything to say, can I wind up?
You can wind up.
Okay, so just one quick thing before I ask our two guests for their recommendations. I don't know if you guys remember, I know Rahul and I are around the same age, but the Punjab, problem was, we knew people, we were around then, we saw coverage. I personally knew of many journalists who had gone there, a couple who had actually met Bhindranwale, etc. There, I remember there was a change in the profile of the quote-unquote terrorist from the early stage when there was a lot of Pakistan involvement, from them being uneducated, etc., to later a lot of people of decent education, if not taking up arms, they became sympathetic to violence against the state, even if they did not support Bhindranwale. It was a very interesting profile of many people who I actually spoke to. They did not support Bhindranwale or the call for Khalistan because they wanted Punjab as part of India. But they would not condemn violence against the state. And that is because as military officers, as educated people, they had faced the the profiling of the turban and the humiliation of being set aside. And that was an interesting. I remember the first time I was really surprised. I was talking to this guy who was a few years older than me, and that was the first time. I think I must have been in my teens then. I had never met someone who openly said that, I don't fine if, the Khalistan terrorists are bombing few people. And I was like, huh? Of course, he's in Australia now. He had seen his relatives' house being burned, one of his relatives. So he was very educated and he's doing very well now. He was a Keshdhari Sikh. And he was, I have no future in this country. I've refused to stay here. He was clear when he was 14. I am out of here. And he was not at all sympathetic to any violence against the state. So that progression also kind of happens. People who have something to live for, if pushed far enough, will put that away. But can I wind up? Anyone has anything to say?
I have a small anecdote like this.
Sorry, one sec. Rahul, you were saying something?
No, we're good.
Yeah.
Like I come from an RSS family. I had a guy in my class. His name still is Dilbag Singh. And his family had seen that in Delhi. And we met in 8th standard. And when talking to him and his brother, and we got into fights. But you understand that their sense of injustice for their personal family was such that they didn't mind that kuch log Indian state ke ja rahe to jaan do.
And which is why you can't judge how people react to personal kind of tragedies. But on that note, thank you so much, Rahul. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Very thought through, calm analysis, and well researched and well read. And Sudipto, you too. But before I let both of you go and we move on to the emails, for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, can I please request you for a recommendation? It could be a book, article, film, anything that you think is time well spent. Rahul, you want to go first?
I think now that Sudipto has mentioned K. Balagopal, I urge everyone, especially journalism students and tech bros, to read K. Balagopal. He is readily available. He has done a series of articles for the Economic and Political Weekly. I think there have been a few anthologies around his writings. One great anthology, I think, is being brought out by Navayana. Please read through it to see how life and the issues around it. You are not necessarily black and white. We have to stop looking at things in black and white, for God's sake. So that's an important recommendation. I think the other recommendation I would give, I've been reading this wonderful writer called Guy Stack. He's come with a new book, but I was reading his previous book, which came out in, I think, 2018. He's a young man, and he's suffering from, not suffering, he has some fights with his own minds and decides to walk from Canterbury in England to Jerusalem. And this journey is fantastic. It takes him through Ads, then goes to, to Istanbul, then to Lebanon, and finally to Jerusalem. I think a distance of about 5,000 kilometers in a period of about 10 months. Guy Stack, Gystagg. A wonderful book. I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Rahul. And Sudipto?
Yeah, so I was also going to recommend Balagopal. His selected works. His entire thing on fascism, class, caste. This whole body of work is very, very exciting for anybody who wants to understand. And I think this business of revolution, right? I suppose, Rahul talked about grays, and I suppose as I have grayed, I have become very suspicious of revolutions. I believe in incremental change. I believe in, cycles, of change, as opposed to this jhatka treatment of, one shot mein revolution ho gaya. And I think one of the people who talks about revolutionaries and their complication, while looking at them as some romantic figures also, but then looking at their contradictions is Marquez, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez is an interesting, person to read to understand, these different dimensions of the revolutionary and revolution and all of that. Many South American writers, I think, have this one kind of taunt towards revolution.
Right.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Rahul. Hope to see you in the studio soon sometime. I'll coordinate with you. and your team.
My pleasure, Adi.
Thanks, Sudipto. Have a good time. And if you're in Kolkata for a bit, go have mutton curry at Suruchi, one of my favorite in the country.
I will for you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
और you उसके लिए खाओ भाई, खाना किसी और के लिए
नहीं
खाएगा।
नहीं नहीं नहीं, अभिनंदन मेरे अभी मुंह बोले पाजी बन गए मेरे। ठीक
Very
है,
good.
तो उनके लिए कर लेंगे।
Thanks, man. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Now for our feedback from our subscribers. We only entertain the feedback from subscribers. You can mail us at podcasts@newslaundry.com. I repeat, podcasts@newslaundry.com, or click on the link in the show notes below. Please keep your feedback less than 150 words. In the next couple of weeks, we will be having that special where we read all the feedback left over, about 40-50 emails that are still pending. But today's emails have been curated by Shardool, and if Shardool's throat is acting
Yeah,
up, maybe Jayashree
No,
can
I'm
read it
happy
out.
to read.
You okay? Okay, fine. All
जब फट जाएगा मांस तब पता लगेगा।
ठीक है. All right.
So, the first letter is from Anonymous, and they write, "Hello, I am writing to give my honest feedback for last Hafta in Charcha. As a regular listener of both podcasts, it was disappointing to see it dedicated to just Bihar elections, and everything looked very rushed and incomplete because results were not out yet. It looked more like quote-unquote breaking news show. We expect in-depth analysis of issues in Hafta in Charcha. Dedicating whole podcast to incomplete results of Bihar elections compromise the quality of them. Also, YouTube Live compromised the audio quality of both podcasts. It is just an honest feedback from my side. Keep up the good work."
Thank you, Anonymous. Thanks for your support. Appreciate it. This is something that even I grapple with. I actually leave it to the editors to decide. But I also get the logic that when such a big election result is happening, and what will we discuss that day? I don't know. Jayashree, you have any view on this? I mean, can we completely
Yeah, I
go
mean, I
off?
think it was also a thing that we were trying, right? We haven't done a Hafta live during results day in a very, very long time. Usually we'll do a separate live that happens on YouTube. Since it coincided, I think we just thought we'd try it and see how it goes. But also point taken that maybe it wasn't lending itself to the best kind of Hafta episode that it might have.
So I was part of Charcha discussion, and yes, it was less of a podcast and more of a live discussion on the ongoing counting.
As results were coming
Yeah,
in and more and more details. were
The
coming.
primary reason I think was because it coincided, like Jayashree said, the results were coming out on Friday, and on Friday we record.
Also, I mean, at least back when I was used to be a journalist, a reporter in the 90s, one of the things that we were taught is not just why you covering the story. It is you have to be able to answer two questions: why and why now.
Yeah.
And on the why now is a more difficult question to answer. So if we were to discuss, let's say, something that we could discuss 3 weeks later, and we were discussing on the day of Bihar election, I find it really a little harder to answer, okay, you're discussing this, why now? On the day when Bihar is happening. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the news cycle, like elections of any state, but especially big states, they also pertain to lives of millions and millions of people.
Sure,
So yeah, and it's also dance of democracy, all that analogy. The next letter is from DRD, very short, crisp, 36-word letter. Question: Women voters are being projected as the force behind BJP's electoral success. Bihar, Maharashtra, etc. Is it just the cash transfers to women, or does it say more about how women are shaping politics at the moment?
Both, I think.
Yeah, both.
It says both. Yeah.
But it is a bad practice. Direct cash transfers are bad practice. But anyway.
No, but I think the cash transfer is just this very strategic thing for a party to do just before an election,
Yeah.
because it's just you easily get the vote rather than the boredom of having to actually put in place policies and strategies
And
over 5
systems
years.
so that you don't have to do cash transfers.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
The next, अरे बड़ा अच्छा नाम है sir. Next letter is from Yuyutsu Kuru. He has changed the कौरवों को छोड़ के पांडव में आ गए हैं. Sohar is sung only when male child is born. The word lalana in the second line is used for male children only. I think he's talking about the recommendation of Anand. I don't know why Raman sir will recommend a pure propaganda series on Vantara, like what I can learn from this other than know how great Ambanis are. What will be Nitish's legacy? I think history will judge him way harsher than present. He is praised today because he is winning. But he is enabler of this death of democracy and democratic system in India. After 2024 elections, he had chance to fix this, but he timidly chose, I think he means 2014. Anyway, chose easier path. A person who has been CM for 20 years couldn't have courage to take on the communal forces. That will be his legacy. He could have been great, but he will be counted as timid opportunist, where Lalu, even for losing elections after elections, will always be remembered for stopping Advani.
I tend to agree with this. I think Nitish will be judged very harshly as a historical figure. I mean, he'd be seen as the, real slimy chap who would like weasel his way into like any situation to get benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think his legacy is that he just wanted to be chief minister, and he would do anything that and would take any decision towards the end of I will be chief minister, not towards the end of anything else. And yes, all politicians do this for the same reasons, except some do not do it as obviously and as consistently as Nitish Kumar has done. So
his legacy will be more in Ayaram Gayaram category. The next letter is from Rajashree Balakrishnan. Hello team, NL Hafta Live was a nice surprise, although the topic of the live was not. Given the amount of stories NL and other independent media has done on SIR and voter suppression, I was surprised that there was no mention of the impact of SIR on the election results. Pro-incumbency makes sense for JDU and Nitish, but there was barely any discussion on how BJP outscored JDU. 2 hours of listening to the same old caste rule supreme analysis were depressing. Will our nation ever break out of the caste system? It just seems like a hopeless situation. P.S. Missed Abhinandan going on a rant this episode. Thoda gali galoch hona chahiye. I always agree, Rajashree.
Abhinandan, that's your cue.
Keep up the good.
Let's take it away.
Thank you, Rajashree. But I think when we are discussing election and it's live, I tend to
कभी शराफत का चोगा भी ओढ़ लेना पड़ता है दोस्त.
Yeah.
The next letter is from Vishakha Bhatnagar. Vishakha writes, your guest really outdid herself. Oh, I love this letter. All this Bihar date of birth. Charming, truly. And your little nod of agreement. Chef's kiss. She couldn't even pronounce the name of my state. But sure, let's all share a laugh. As a brown person, I've had my fair share of discrimination abroad. But honestly, my own country trained me well. After years of internalized mockery and regional sneering, the racism outside just feels familiar. So when a Tamilian, Malayali or Panju gets their first taste of their foreign discrimination, all I can do is smile wryly. Welcome to the Brown Club of India, folks. We've been serving this dish hot at home for decades. Have a wonderful weekend.
Vishaka, apologies.
Point taken.
I mean, although my view on sensitivity on
pronunciation,
not pronunciation, on Indian commentary on other Indian communities. I am half Tamil, I'm half Punjabi. I find my Tamil side takes objection to things which are oversensitive, especially because my Tamil side is an Iyer side, so you have not faced any such major, it's not like, you have been on the receiving end of. So they have enough to hate about Punjabis and Jats. I was in DU. There was people, the Harrys were not, it was not a complimentary term. In DU in the 80s and 90s. And nor was these Jat types. The Harrys are more sensitive about it than the Jats. I mean, there may be some power dynamic, which is why, but I guess there's certain stereotypes which are not fair, but are unacceptable. Like, for example, if you were to say that Indians are generally dirty, it's a lousy thing to say, but if you go abroad, you can't really disprove that.
Unhygienic, yes.
From when you go to an Indian neighborhood as opposed to another neighborhood.
You haven't met me yet.
So I'm just, your point taken. Everyone says, I mean, you have view on this, Jayashree, you're Tamilian.
Yeah, my Tamil side takes great offense to your Tamil side, but it's okay. I mean, there are a lot of horrible things that I think very correctly we should be calling out. And also, I think you should look at the question of whether you're punching up and punching down depending on who the person is. But
I think the point she's making is that they said that basically these Bihar date of births meant that if in Bihar, you cannot believe any date of birth because everyone's a fake. that everyone has a fake birth certificate. I think that is the basic point she's making. I think.
That's a large state.
Yeah, the pronunciation was just a MA side note, but yeah.
Nearly like 132 million people. Anyway, next letter is from Raman.
Or is it Raman? Haha.
Hey, Raman sir, why is he sending letters as subscriber? Anyway.
Raman.
See, but because of Raman sir, my parents live just right near a street which is called Raman Street, and I have grown up on that street, and I've been calling it Raman Street for like 30 years, and because of Raman sir, I now look at it and think, yes, they're on Raman Street, but they are not. So,
Right.
There is a Korean reason for this because Raman is now Ramen.
Right.
Oh, God.
Anyway, Hafta 562, I found Manisha's take on H-bomb to be too kind on the ECI. The theory of quote-unquote stock images for missing epic photos was difficult to buy. Remember, the P in the epic stands for photo. Can an electoral roll be finalized without an authentic photo? There are overwhelming red flags in this matter. The hurried rule tweak to hide CCTV footage, the Chandigarh mayor poll where Anil Masih was caught on video defacing ballots, and the tweak in the rules to select the ECs. Dismissing these allegations as glitches is being unduly kind to the ECI, and expecting them to provide convincing reasons as to what is actually happening is naive. On the other hand, Jayashree's take was much more balanced. It is now up to the journalists to take it up. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. But yeah, this whole SIR thing to decode it and to conclusively say what impact it has is, I don't even know what methodology one would follow, but yeah, it's a challenge, Raman. I agree with you. But net macro picture, like I said, it's not a level playing field. So if you got to beat the BJP, you have to pull off like a miracle like a Kapil Dev did in 1983. It's like that. So yeah.
As far as I remember, although Manisha is very well equipped to defend herself, but I think what she was saying is the magnitude of this win cannot only be attributed to SIR. Because at best, even if you agree all the bad cases which happened, the names deleted, that only counts to, I think, 2.8 to 3%.
So we'll wind up for today. But first we'll get the recommendations of the rest of the panel. So Jayashree, you want to go first?
Yes, 3 superb recommendations for the week. So there was this great story in Mumbai Mirror about something that I often wonder about this. It's all these experts who are wheeled in to talk about government mega projects that cost crores. They'll sound great on paper, but they're actually like intensely rubbish when it comes to the actual improvement of infrastructure and livelihoods. But there will always be an expert floating around who will have some study, and they'll tell you why you absolutely must be ecstatic that your government is spending thousands of crores on this. So it's a short opinion piece on who these hard-nosed experts are, where they're probably coming from, and why you should not take what they say seriously. So that's one. Number 2 is this really fun story that was in the News Minute, actually, on hoax bomb calls and how they're wearing out the police across states. And the thing is, they've also profiled various people who have been arrested for these hoax bomb calls. For example, there's one woman in Chennai who, when we were talking about what backgrounds people come from, so she's like an aerospace engineer or something, and she was arrested by the Ahmedabad police for placing a hoax call, but by the time they arrested her, she'd already placed over 20 hoax calls across 12 cities. So it's just interesting to sort of see the kinds of people who are behind this, and like also how the cops have to deal with it. And finally, I am recommending a novel. So if you ever told me I read a book that is told from the point of view of a bird that becomes an internet influencer, I would say, yeah, maybe, but also I don't know, like sounds weird. But I did read that book. I loved it. It's also about New Zealand. It's about the deep poverty of farmers and about social media culture and changing relationships. And also, yes, it is about a bird that becomes a social media influencer, but it is great. So it's called The Axeman's Carnival. It's by Catherine Chidgey. So yeah,
Thank you.
Mine also 3 recommendations. The first one is a report by my colleague Prateek about how Indian trains are running, because I used to love riding on trains. Like I'm very autistic in this. All autistic people love riding on trains. So they are fucking up one of our favorite things in public life. So that. The second is I want to plug myself because I've had to watch all these Baba Bageshwar Dham videos to write that piece. Oh my fucking God. And like the line of politicians there. So please read that. I had to suffer for 3 days for that. And the last one is, it came up in my mind through our discussion. Like a very good example of Punjab wala, Machis. Machis is one movie which will tell you how these things, I mean, it's made by Gulzar. And if I could, I would recommend its song also, but I won't.
Okay. Oh, we were planning to start that system of democratizing the song choice.
He can do the song then for.
Yeah, so you can choose the song today because we got a letter that every week I choose the song, so that should also be by turns. So you can choose the song
छोड़ा है
today.
हम इस उसका एक पैरा में बता दूंगा. It's a
ठीक है.
beautiful line to understand what is happening.
So it'll be your song.
Perfect.
That is a timeless song. I hope you agree.
Right. So my recommendation, I have two this week. One is our colleague Samarth Grover's piece, The Unbearable Uselessness of India's Environment Minister. And do watch the video explainer. Share it with as many people as you can. If you can, tag the minister. So the only time he makes news is not because someone is condoning a family bereavement or he is talking about COP3. Maybe someone should corner him and ask him what the hell he's doing. And I've said this before, we keep blaming parties, whether it is Punjab, AAP, Madhya Pradesh, BJP, Haryana, whoever may be in power, UP, because 5 states, there's crop burning happening. It impacts all 5 states. There's vehicular pollution. Only the central government can do this, just like GST, which they made a hash of. Unless the center is involved in actually wanting to make everybody work together, we can keep blaming each other's state. Because depending on which day, some states the farm fires will be high, other states it will be less, and then next week it will change. Vehicular pollution, other measures, the plants that are spewing smoke in the air across these 5 states. But Mr. Environment Minister is quietly living in these 4-5 acre houses that we fund for him.
Bhupender ji.
And doing jack squat. So congratulations, Mr. Bhupender ji. You are truly an inspiration to those who want to do nothing in life. And the second is a very interesting, it's actually economics podcast, but it explores many aspects. It's a new experiment in remote work from the inside. It is how prisoners are being given jobs inside the prison so they can work from home. It's tech and they are earning serious money, way more than you and I are earning, Shardool, by the way. And it makes you think about, because at least 2 of these guys are serving, one of them is a lady actually, are serving time for like really violent crimes, like cutting someone with a machete. And one of those people was a child. But when he's being interviewed, he sounds reasonable, rational.
Yes.
They haven't interviewed him, they have interviewed his warden, but the other 2 people are also accused of violent crimes, including murder. To give them this chance, the guy who's a correctional facility point of view, the economic aspect that this actually incentivizes the police authorities or the prison authorities not to give them parole, because a part of that earning actually is kept by the prison.
In fact, what is called generally more amount is taxed than it would have been taxed outside.
But it's really interesting, and I was just thinking that again, America surprises you. It brings out the worst in things. It brings out some very interesting experiments. So yeah, it made me think at various levels, from the economic point of view, from the social point of view, from the, how would a victim's family take this chance? Anyway, so very interesting. With that, we must thank our subscribers. There's a QR code again, 26% drop because Sarkar has given a 26% raise for print ads. We are giving a 26% drop discount. Scan the QR code, click on the link. Please share this with your friends, family, those who think journalism that is independent of large corporate and government interference and influence should be supported. We'd like to thank our wonderful sound recordist Anil and our wonderful 2 producers, A&A, that is Amit and Ashish. And
which one is awful and which one is awesome? That's the question.
That's the question.
लाख रुपए का person है क्या भैया?
And Shardool and Jayashree.
Thank you.
We'll leave you with this song, which is Shardool's pick for the week. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.